All right, in this last presentation for Module 3, where we're talking about the team and communications, is really focused just on communications. We'll talk a little bit about some conflict stuff, but really that's a part of making sure that the lines of communication and everything needs to get worked through as a team is there in place as well. So again, for the third time, these are people management, communication. These are critical knowledge areas that we need to have as part of our the plates that we need to keep spinning as we move forward towards successful project execution. Communications, we want to focus that separately here. It may not seem like it's a key element of what you're trying to do as a project manager, but it actually is. Because if you think about managing your communication very deliberately and very proactively, what you're trying to do is making sure that everyone has the information that they need to do their part of the job appropriately. And that's true across your team, and it's also true across the stakeholders. So everyone that you need to be doing something to make sure this project is successful, you need to make sure they have the tools and the processes and the information to do that effectively. And that really just comes down to communications. So if you're not paying attention to communications, you get yourself in a lot of trouble because people won't have the information that they need to move together successfully. So there's a number of processes that we have. We have communications planning, which is basically determining communication needs to stakeholders. Our project this week will go into that specifically. Actual distribution and collaboration. So that's making needed information available in a timely manner to all the stakeholders. There's performance reporting, which is then communicating status reports, progress measurement, forecasts, those kinds of things where you collect and then disseminate performance information. And then there's communication related to managing your stakeholders. So again, we're going to talk a lot about the team, but there's also a matter of what are you doing to the folks outside of the team that also influence the success or failure of the project. One thing I want to draw out is the importance of face-to-face communication. And this is particularly relevant in the digital age that we're in now, where people are IMing and texting each other all the time, in desks next to each other, texting each other. There is a value to face-to-face communication that you can't get past. And when we talk about different communication methods, I'm going to go over a little bit of a chart a little later where it talks about what's the most effective way to communicate some of these things. And just because you're comfortable with a particular form of communication, whether that be just email or whether that's texting or whether that's IMing or whatever, you still have to be able to use the other forms for particular reasons. One of those, face-to-face, is an incredibly important communication mechanism. They say 58% communication is through body language, and that's a lot of when you're trying to really build a relationship with somebody, sort through some tricky problems, understand people's motivations. You got to do that face to face. They say that, the research here lays the numbers out, how the words are said, tone, body language itself. It's the majority of a lot of these kinds of communications when those communications are intended to build relationships. So face to face is important for the team. That's why being in one place together is important for a team. Pay attention to what is more than just the actual words people are saying, because they're communicating a lot through these other mechanisms. Encouraging face-to-face meetings in an environment where people aren't necessarily used to talking face-to-face is a huge way to build relationships across the team. It's how families build relationships. It's how you can make the team actually work together better. So that all comes down to communication planning. You should have a communication management plan. And what that means, that's a document. So for our purposes, this term, we're going to build that into our project management plan. What that section of the plan basically says is, here's how we're going to communicate to the stakeholders, to the team, to everyone that we need to communicate for. Here's the method, here's the frequency of communication, here's what we're going to communicate, here's the escalation path, and here's how we're going to make sure everyone stays in contact. So there is an actual plan that you put together that'll make sure that the information is disseminated to all the right people at the right time to make the project go forward successfully. It is information distribution. So getting the right information to the right people at the right time is just as important as developing that information in the first place. If you know something but no one else knows how to do that it exists or what to do with it, then it's not being very useful. Things to consider when you're creating this plan. Use technology to enhance your information distribution, right? Use your formal and informal methods for distributing it. So use people, make sure that people know things, and you're sending information to the people that will be most relevant to team leads, things like that, who will be able to carry that forward and absorb it and really make it impactful for the project. Don't be afraid to report bad information. All information is important for the project. Oral communication via meetings and informal talks helps to bring important information, especially good and bad, out into the open. So a lot of times if you're being very direct, which electronic communication tends to be very direct, if you're talking, just kind of having conversations, that tends to surface other information. So that can be useful in and of itself as a key element of the overall communications plan. Email, instant messaging, collaborative tools, these all can be used effectively. Make sure that your email, your IM, any of these tools are the appropriate medium, though, for doing what you want to communicate. Send that information to the right people. When you're using email and such, use meaningful subject lines. Limit the content to one main subject and be clear and concise as possible. You don't want rambling emails. Then people don't read them and then they don't respond to whatever it is you want them to do. Or sometimes if you're just not clear about it, they won't respond the way you want them to. So be very clear. Make sure you're concise and you're communicating what it is you need to communicate. Also, authorize the right people to share and edit your documents too. So if you've got something out there and you think it needs to be shared, make sure that people know that they can share it and they can edit and they can do what they need to do. Good rule on emails. Never send one that you wouldn't mind your boss or your mother reading. Remember, emails, once they go out into the system, they take a life of their own and they get forwarded all over the place. Don't ever think that what you're sending is private, because truth is, it rarely is. Then, when you get time to have people together, remember to respect people's times. Now, this is you can be on anywhere on a spectrum. People that don't like to have meetings, and so they don't meet enough. And there's people that love to have meetings, and they just grab all the people, put them in a room forever, and it's very disrespectful of their time, because everyone wants to use their time the most effectively. So if a meeting can be avoided, if you're just sending information, just send information. If a meeting can be avoided, then go ahead and avoid it. But if you need to get together and take other people's time away from what they're doing, define the purpose and intended outcome, determine who should attend, who really would be in a bad position if they weren't there. That's what you kind of need to look at it and say who needs to be attending. Provide an agenda. Any handouts, visualize, get all run ahead of time so you're not wasting time with people at the meeting. Start it on time. Run the meeting professionally. Respect people's times. Get them out of there. If you need to break it up into other meetings, then you just have separate meetings after that with smaller groups of people who can address the other issues that may pop up during the meeting. Always be mindful of any time that they're spending in a meeting is not time that they're spending getting their other work done. That's all relevant and important to you as a project manager. Performance reporting. This is about keeping your stakeholders informed about how resources are being used. Three main types are status reports, progress reports, and forecasts. Status basically says, here's where we stand at this particular point in time, right? Here's our status. Progress is more specific in that it describes the project team has accomplished during a certain period at a time. Progress reports tend to be a little more positive and useful because they're describing to the context of the things that the stakeholders care about, right? Status can be everything that's in process. Progress means what have we actually done that's of value. Forecasts then are reports where you're saying we think future status and future progress based on past information and trends. Here's where we think we're going to be at the end of the week. Here's where we think we're going to be at the end of the month. Those are useful messages as well. A lot of times your leadership will want to have some level of those three types of communications. So layout is basically for group of individuals, what are their communication needs? Personal preferences. Introverts and extroverts like to discuss things in public differently and at different amounts. Intuitive people like to understand the big picture, while sensing people really want to understand the step-by-step sort of lay of the land. People that are like thinking types, they want to know the logic behind the decision, while other people just want to know how something affects them personally. When you're communicating to someone, think about what kind of person they are, what they want to hear, how they want to hear it, and then craft your communication to go that way towards them. And we've got some examples here on the right of different kinds of communication and whether they're really appropriate for that type of activity. So on the right, you've got assessing a commitment, seeing how people are really committed to the project. Telephone call is maybe okay. Sending letters, not a good way to do that, because people can just ignore it, or they can send out something that they think sounds right. Meeting is the best way to do that. So get people in the room. Same with consensus. Same with mediating a conflict. You can't do that by email. There are some things like maintaining confidentiality. Phone call is a great way to do that. Resolving a misunderstanding one-on-one. A phone call is a pretty good way to do that. Email can be very effective for like expressing support, providing a permanent record. Those are the kinds of things that you want to do differently based on the kind of communication needs to be and the kind of information you're passing. People also have perfect personal preferences, like we just talked about. Sensing people, feelers want to have different kinds of communication, and those methods of communication can vary by situation. So again, conveying simple information, you can just use a voicemail for that. If you're making a simple request, use an email. If you're trying to resolve a misunderstanding, as we said, get on the phone and actually talk to somebody on the phone. Don't do it by IM, and don't do it by email. Keep in mind that the number of people involved in any communication group increases geometrically the number of communication lines you have to do, and the number of times something can get messed up in the flow. So as the number of people in a team increases, the complexity increases, and the number of ways that the message can be muddied up increases as well. Got an example on here in the bottom. 3 people times 2, 6. So you got 3 lines of communication that things can get messed up on. You have 5 people, all of a sudden you're jumping up to 10 lines of communication. You've got to be clear. We've got to be very, very communicative. Make sure everyone's on the same page continually so you reduce the number of opportunities for things to get muddied or people to get confused going forward. Conflict is an inevitable part of having a team working on a common project, and in fact it can be a positive thing. There is such a thing as creative conflict. But what you want to do is keep a project on track by managing conflict. Do it quickly. Don't wait. Don't let these things fester. Creative conflict or disagreements on solutions. They can be very effective for avoiding groupthink, and they give energy to innovation. This is people that have different ideas about how to solve something, but they work collaboratively to solve it, right? There's conflict there, but it's good. It drives change. Personal conflict is centered on people. It's destructive. So anytime something becomes a problem about you or a problem with this person, then that's for personal conflict. And that can be destructive. You can usually do confrontations most productively when it's done quickly. Get the ideas out in the open, resolve them before they become internalized. If 2 people have opposing ideas about how to do something, quickly get those ideas on the table before they become a part of who they are. They don't latch themselves onto an idea and come up with all kinds of ideas around it. Multiple modes of confrontation, of conflict resolution. Confrontation is direct, face-to-face conflict, problem-solving approach. It usually solves the problem. It's perfect for creative conflict. Compromise is a give and take. A lot of times this leaves people in a sort of nobody happy in a creative conflict, but can be useful for personal stuff. Smoothing just sort of de-emphasizes it and keeps everyone moving forward. It's best for personal conflict where there isn't really a good answer. Forcing is a win-lose approach through authority. It's bad for both types, really. No one's going to be happy when you just come in and say this is the way it's going to be. Withdrawal or retreat is bad for both types as well. If you just say we're going to avoid it, try to work around it, then nothing's getting done. Confrontation generally is the best way to approach these kinds of conflicts because you get it out in the open quickly and start working through the issues. The less time people have to really internalize their own opinions and make them a part of whatever their belief system is, the better you're going to be at addressing the issues. So as soon as you find there are issues, jump on them quickly, get them out in front of the team, and let the team really sort of use all of those team building skills they've had over the last period of time to come together and resolve, take some steps forward. Once you've decided on a path, it's a lot easier for everyone to get behind it if they haven't internalized and made a big long case for a different path going forward on the other way. So that's some ideas on conflict resolution, on communication in general. We will be developing a communication plan and publishing that as part of our project management plan.